Hello, grade 11. Welcome. We will discuss today module 1. Okay? So, module 1 is about basic concepts of functions. And of course, we will get to know what is a function, what is a relation, what is domain and range, and most especially, how to determine the domain and range because I got a lot of feedback from you na you find it difficult in determining the domain and range. So I hope you will watch till the end of this video so that you will be gaining more insights of this lesson. Okay? Okay, so this is the first module for this subject. It is basic concepts of functions. Okay, so in this lesson, students are expected to define functions and differentiate the types of functions, and then you're also expected to determine the domain and range. Okay, now, of course, at the end of this lesson, I'm expecting that you will be able to answer these questions here in the pre-test. So I want you to go over with it once we are done with the lesson. Okay. So here are our intended learning outcomes. The students must have defined functions, differentiated the types of functions, and determine the domain and range of a function. Okay, so by the way, what is a function? Everywhere around us, we can actually observe patterns, right? And as what they say, God is the greatest mathematician. So ang iyang mga creations are also mathematically based. And if we will just be a keen observer nga atong i-observe kung unsay naa sa atong palibot, it will reveal some patterns. Because of course, those creations are creations of God. So it was made hunahuna ginas Ginoo gyud. Okay? So our job as human beings is to discover more of the amazing creations of God. Okay? And one way to do that is to understand the concept of function. But before that, let us first discuss relation. So a relation is a set of ordered pairs. So if x and y are elements of these sets, and if a relation exists between x and y, then we say that x corresponds to y and or that y depends on x. So when we say relation, one way of representing it is using the concept of ordered pair. So we have here the ordered pair xy. Okay. So now we will not dwell more about relation because we will be focusing on a more special kind of relation, which is function. What is a function? It is one of the most important concepts in the study of math, as what I have said a while ago. Because as you go higher in the field of mathematics, you will encounter more complex functions. Example, um, it was not until I think the 17th or the 18th century that exponential function was known. So what is the purpose of an exponential function? It was created to predict, especially on population. So why is it important for us to predict the population of a certain place over a certain period of time? It serves many purposes, and one of that is for economic reasons as well as political. Okay, so the data gathered on that period, and then using the exponential function, it will guide the leaders of a specific place on what to do and then how to become future proof. Okay, now what is a function? A function f from A to B is a relation from A to B where for each A element of A, take note on how you read this, there corresponds exactly one B element of B such that the ordered pair AB satisfies F. So, dapat nag-practice ta kung saan na siya og basa. Okay. It can also be defined as a set of ordered pairs in which no two ordered pairs have the same first component but different second components. Okay lang nga magbalik-balik ang second component as long as the first component dili siya pwede magparehas. Okay? So now, let's go to domain. What is domain? The domain is the set of permissible input values, while the range is the set of output values. And functions can be categorized as one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, and many-to-many. So later, I will give you some examples on how you can imagine this way of categorizing functions. Now, this time, we will be discussing how do we represent function. So there are a lot of ways actually. The first one is you can represent function as a set of ordered pairs. Parehas ani. Okay? And normally, when we say function, kinahanglan nato siya panganlan. So in this case, what we are using is a capital letter in the English alphabet. Not necessarily italicized, but capital letter siya sa English alphabet. And since it is a set, it must be enclosed with brace. Okay? Next, functions can also be represented using equation. And by the way, as we go along with our lesson, this way of representing function mo na siya ang pinaka-dominant ni siya nga way of representing function. Next, by the way, before that, when you write function as an equation, you can use this f of x or g of x or kaning duha, pwede nimo siya pulihan og letter y. Next, function as a graph. Okay, kada equation or kada function or kada equation, there is a corresponding graph. And if you are already very good in it, by just looking at the graph, mahibal-an na nimo siya kung function ba siya or dili. Next, function as table of values. So as always, na ay x, na ay y. So in the function g of x equals x squared plus 1, if the input values for x are 1 and 2, then the output values are 2 and 5. So giunsa man na siya. Imo lang siyang i-substitute. Like as simple as that. So what do you think is the output value if the input value is negative 4? So sulat dayon ka g of negative 4 is equal to negative 4 squared plus 1. So this becomes 16 plus 1 or 17. Now, if you are given a graph of a relation or an equation, and then you will be asked to determine whether it is a graph of a function or not, ang imong gamiton nga test is vertical line test. So sa may pulos ana niya, you draw a vertical line. If that vertical line crosses the graph of the function of the relation in at most 1, pwede wala, pwede 1, then that is the graph of a function. But if it crosses the graph of a relation twice or more, then definitely that graph is not a graph of a function. Now, another way of categorizing function is through the degree, the highest degree that it has. So the first here is constant. It is a function of 0 degree that are of the form f of x equals c. And c here should not be equal to 0. Linear function. Kani familiar na mo ani because you already had this lesson way back in grade 8. It is grade 7 di ay. It is a function of first degree polynomial that are of the form f of x equals ax plus b. Next, quadratic function. It is a function of the form f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a must not be equal to 0. Okay, so for quadratic function, you are already knowledgeable with this because this was discussed to you in grade 9. Next is rational function. It is the quotient of two polynomial functions that are of the form f of x equals g of x over h of x, where h of x must not be equal to 0. So there is an added condition here. And what do you think is the reason nga nung naay condition nga h of x must not be equal to 0? That is because division by 0 is not allowed. Okay? So that is why nagi mga ingon ani nga mga conditions. Makakita gani mong function nga naay variable sa denominator, then definitely that function is rational. Next, number 5, power function. So power function is a function of the form f of x equals x to the power of n, where n is any real number. And for number 6, absolute value function. It is a function of the form f of x equals kani siya nga symbol. So can you still recall what is the shape of the graph of an absolute value function? So if you could still remember, so we can write this as y, we can write this as y equals absolute value of x. So if you can still remember, the graph of this is letter V. Pwede pataas, pwede po ubos. So yeah. Next, polynomial function. Polynomial function is any function of the form. So pwede nga, the highest exponent is 3, the highest degree is 3, pwede 4, pwede 5. That's polynomial. And the last one here is greatest integer function. So let me add, by the way, before that, greatest integer function is a function of the form f of x equals condition na symbol. Nakakulong o bracket ang x. Okay? And by the way, medyo weird na siya nga ang graph ani kay mura na siya lollipop. So later, itry na ko nga ma-show na ko sa inyo. But for the meantime, pwede na to idugang diri kay wala nalimtan na ko butang diri radical function. Okay? When we say radical function, maka-form ka og radical function if the exponent of your variable is a fraction. Say for example, f of x equals x to the power of 1/2. So when we say x to the power of 1/2, another way of writing that one is square root of x. So nanay siya square root. Kung mingon po kag x to the power of 1/3, cube root of x po na siya. So, lahi po na siya. So here, natay mga listahan sa mga functions as well as the domain and range of the different functions. Now, if set of ordered pairs lang ang gihatag, it is very easy to determine the domain and the range. Ang imo lang buhaton, ilista. Pero, dili pwede nga paglista nimo, say for example, ikaduha ni balik si 1 sa x, ikaduha po nimo isulat si 1. No, kausa lang. Okay? So, muna siya diri, nara x sub 1, x sub 2, x sub 3. That's domain. All the allowable values for x. And then for the range, nara si y sub 1, y sub 2, and y sub 3. Okay? So, constant function. Kani, pinakasayon gini siya dumduman. Nga naman, because constant function, for constant function, the domain is the set of all real numbers. But the range is just one number only. That is why gitawag siya nga constant function. Okay. Unsay dagway ana? So let us, okay, so na-exit ako sa akong screen sa ano so that you can see this application here. So mo ni siya ang Desmos guys. So that is why dapat kabalo mo ana. Okay? Now, y equals, sorry. Okay, there you have it guys. It is a function because tanan values ni kung mag-drawing ka o vertical line, it will intersect the graph in at most one point only. So tanan values ni x maigo niya, but for the value of y usa ra gyud kanilang yung 3. Yes. So pwede man pud nga kana so if you're going to hover it around something like that, so lahi-lahi ang values ni x but same lagi ang value ni y. Next, linear function. So kani familiar na mo ani. So y equals, say for example, 2x plus 2. Something like that. And of course, when we say linear, the graph of that function is line, straight line. So when we say straight line, napo na siya yung mga x-intercept o y-intercept. So asang x-intercept? Kani. So the x-intercept is -1. If y is equal to 0, if you let y equal to 0, you will get the x-intercept. And this is the y-intercept, 0, 2. Okay? So now, if tanaw nimo siya, sag-asa nimo itunong, it will give you values, galahi-lahi ang values both ni x o ni y. Then walay gabalik-balik. So therefore, maigo niya tanan, values ni x and tanan pud nga value ni y. That is why for linear function, the domain is all real numbers. All real numbers. This one is symbol for set of all real numbers. Ang y pod or the range is all real numbers yapon. So pwede ra actually class nga magsulat mo all real numbers. Okay, next. Ang medyo kuti na dayon, starting with quadratic, it's getting a bit complicated because daghan kay bantayan. Okay? So here, na si Kuan, bukod kay si Sir Julius, oh. Na si Kim Julius. Okay, so mato siya. And then, for quadratic function, whatever is the shape, the domain will always be set of all real numbers. Kana. Asa man siya maglahi-lahi sa range. Kani. Okay? So we will dig deeper into that. That is why dapat ma-remember to ninyo kung unsaon pag-convert ang atong quadratic function into its vertex form. Sa vertex form, y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And this vertex form will then guide you as to how you are going to determine the range. Y equals x squared minus 3. So the graph looks like this. Still, it is a function, but dili na all real numbers ang range. Nag-repeat mo gud ang range. So, this is an example of a parabola that opens upward. Pwede na ito na siya utrohon nga mo baligtad siya. Kutangan na nato og negative sa ubos. That's how you do it. And of course, muna siyang iyahang x-intercepts. So if you're going to examine, the given is y equals x squared minus 3. So irrational ang iyang x-intercepts. Okay, so for that's for quadratic function. And remember, since this opens upward, the range is all real numbers greater than or equal to -3. Okay, next. Let us discuss rational function. So when we say rational, basta ganina ay variable sa denominator mo na siya. Example, y equals 1 divided by x. Something like that. Now, sa rational function, isa ra gid imong bantayan. The domain is the set of all real numbers except the value, that real number that will make your denominator 0. Example, y equals 1 over x. So the domain is all real numbers except 0, because 0 will make the denominator 0. Another one, y equals 3 over x plus 2. So the domain here is all real numbers except -2, because ang -2, it will make the denominator 0. However, for the range, medyo tricky ang pag-compute sa range ani, so dili sa nako i-discuss karon. We will reserve that for another lesson. So there is a particular lesson for that. Nga na siya ka special. Na a theorem that will guide you in determining the range. Next is we have radical function. So when we say radical, muna to siya na ay square root, cube root, fourth root, and so on. So, ang radical, isa ra gid imong bantayan. If the index, so mo ni siyang index guys, kanang naa din sa gawas. If the index is odd number, walay problema. Example, f of x equals cube root of x, fifth root of x, seventh root, kay pwede na nga ang sulod niya, the radicand, pwede siya nga negative. But if even integer siya, dili pwede. Okay. So, I will explain that sa later ng mga examples. Y equals square root of 2x. Diba? So, function siya. Okay, kausa raman siya. And then, it is actually the half lang siya sa parabola that opens to the right. Okay? Next, absolute value. So again, so to, ang dagway sa absolute value is letter V. Say for example kana, ang yang murag tunga-tunga kibali like its vertex, it's located at the center. So kung magdugang ta diri og -3, pwede siya mo ubos. If we are going to put a number like plus or minus inside, musibog po na siya. -1. Kung +1, if it's +1, to the left siya mo padulong. Okay? And when we say absolute value function, the domain is all real numbers, but the range is not. Same with quadratic. So more or less pares-parehas sila. Okay, mura sila na ay mga vertices. Okay? Now, piecewise function is a function which is defined by multiple subfunctions, where each subfunction applied to a certain interval of the main function's domain. So in short, complicated siya nga function. Pwede nga kani nga domain, linear function, kani nga domain, quadratic, kani din nga specific domain is radical. So here, in our formative assessment, you were taught You were given this example of functions and then you're asked to determine. So for letter A, this is rational. Rational because naa siya variable sa ubos. For letter B, polynomial. Yes, it's obviously polynomial because walay negative nga exponent and wala pa radical nga exponent. And then the highest exponent is 4. In fact, say for example, when we say f of x equals 2, it's also polynomial. But the special term for that is constant function. For letter C, we have power function. Pwede gyapon siya tawagon nga polynomial. For letter D, f of x equals 18, it's constant function. For letter E, look at the highest exponent. It's 1. That makes it linear. For letter F, na symbol for absolute value. That is why it's absolute value function. For letter G, the highest exponent is 2. This makes it quadratic. And for letter H, to take note of this symbol, nagamit siya og bracket. So therefore, it's a greatest integer function. I don't know if ano to diri og greatest integer function. Mangita sa ko ha. Murag wala. I think there's no feature here for to graph. Wala. Okay, so in our next lesson, maghatag og example sa dagway sa greatest integer function. Okay? Now, how about in determining the domain and the range? So here, for number 2, so the domain is 1, 3, and 6. Siya. For letter F, for the range, I mean, so we have 2, 5, and 7. Next, for letter B, letter C, letter D, and letter E, tanan ni sila, the domain is all real numbers. Okay, so again, tanan constant, tanan linear, and tanan quadratic functions, automatic, ang ilang domain is all real numbers. Okay? Now, let us go to their corresponding range. So f of x is equal to 7, so mao na po ni siya. And then for f of x equals 2x plus 9, as what I have said a while ago, both the domain and range of a linear function is all real numbers. Next, for letter D, if you have noticed, quadratic siya. It will be best if ato siyang ikuan para mas makita gid ninyo. Let us graph it. So we have here x squared minus 2x plus 1. Ano siya, guys? The lowest point here is for the domain, ano to siya, all real numbers. But for the range, the lowest value of y here is 0. That is why the range is set of all y such that y is greater than or equal to 0. And since it opens upward, ang kaniyang vertex, it is the lowest point. But if this parabola opens downward, the vertex serves as the maximum point. For letter F, here we have a denominator nga na ay variable. So, klaro kay ng x dira. So, what number will make our denominator 0? It's obviously 2. So, that is why ang domain is set of all x such that x is not equal to 2. How about for the range? Nganong naka-arrive siya og ay napaday isa di ay. Sige, let's continue letter F. Why is it that the answer is set of all y such that y is less than or is not equal to 1? So, as what I've said a while ago, there is a specific theorem for that. Okay? So, if the same ang degree sa numerator and denominator, what you're going to do is divide the number nga naa sa ilang kilid. Mo na din na siya ang number nga that is not included in the range. Okay? So, it would like serve as the horizontal asymptote. Okay? So, para mas makita ginato na siya, let us graph it. So, it is x plus 3 divided by x minus 2. Mana siya yung dagway. And the x and the y intercepts. It is asymptotic to the vertical line x equals 2, and it is also asymptotic to the horizontal line y equals 1. Okay, next. Napadita isa diri ka quadratic, nalimtan nato ni siya. This quadratic is kuan siya, it opens downward. So negative x squared plus 2x minus wait lang. Negative x squared plus 2x plus 2. So mana siya yung dagway. Okay? The domain is all real numbers, but tanawin ang range, set of all y such that y is less than or equal to 3. So nga naman, ang yung vertex, it served as the maximum point. So wala naman siya ni-add dito sa taas ang graph, so walay labot ang number is greater than 3. Okay? Now, for next question, letter G, f of x equals cube root of x plus 5. So if naminaw mo kaganina sa akong gingon, since the index is odd, walay restriction sa domain, wala po'y restriction sa range. Bisag unsa ra actually. Okay? So that is why the domain and the range is all real numbers. So tanaw nato para ma-visualize ginato siya. So this is x plus 5. Tapos gi-raise siya og 1/3. 1 divided by 3. Wait lang. Okay, ano siya yan dagway. So if you're going to zoom out, klaro kaayo nga ang iyahang domain is all real numbers, ang range all real numbers gyapon, pero hinay ka iyang pagdagan. Okay? Yes. For letter H, so square root. Muna ni siya ang naay restriction. So let us input y equals square root of x minus 8. So naara. The domain is what? Nagsugo dira. So why is it that the domain is set of all x such that x is greater than or equal to 8? So whatever is the expression there, say for example x minus 8, you equate it with 0, so x equals 8. So ang pinakagamay, the smallest value that x can take on is 8. So again, dili pwede nga ma-negative ang sulod sa square root or fourth root or sixth root because it will give you imaginary numbers which is not within your scope. And then for the range, ang pinakagamay nga value dapat is, di ba, is 8. So if 8, i-substitute nimo siya sa x dinhi, it will give you square root of 8 minus 8 or square root of 0 or 0. That is why the range is set of all y such that y is greater than or equal to 0. And take note, pasakat siya. So for the last item, we have here absolute value. So absolute value of x minus 3. So the shape is letter V. This is somewhat like the vertex. And then this is the vertex slash x-intercept. And then the other one is y-intercept. So for the domain, all real numbers. But for the range, we have noticed the smallest value that it can take on is for y is 0. That is why, pero kung, say, ito, eksperimentuhan ha, if we are going to put a negative outside, mabaligtad ang graph ni absolute value. Okay? So there you have it, guys. That ends our module 1. So please do take note that the reference book that we had last school year is still useful for now. Okay? So kindly refer to them, and then of course dili lang kato bisag unsa nga libro for Math 11, you can actually use it. Okay? So that would be all. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.